We're going to talk a little bit about the software-defined edge and what we at Riverbed think of as the software-defined edge. As Josh has explained a little earlier, there's a vast underserved set of locations that's in a customer's environment that are typically that haven't got the attention that data centers have received in the past. And these are typically at the edge of your enterprise. Josh spoke about manufacturing plants, about retail stores, or about law offices and so on. But those are typically the underserved areas of your business. The important part is that's actually where a lot of revenue for organizations comes from. We've done a survey a couple of years ago, and what we found was over 50% of 50% of employees in a typical enterprise are actually located in these locations that have essentially substandard and outdated IT infrastructures. And this is quite a complex world that enterprises have these days. In addition to all of the edge infrastructure they have to go and grapple with some of the mega trends that are happening in the industry, such as going and accessing cloud infrastructure. Data centers still continue to exist, possibly some co-located facilities. Companies are going in and trying to invest in infrastructure as service-based applications. There's definitely a lot of SaaS-based applications such as Office 365, SharePoint, and others. So it's quite a complex landscape. And when you're going and talking about all the applications that exist in those environments, there's a way in which everyone is looking for that one magic bullet that's going to go and make access to those applications agile, fast, and secure. And that's the problem space that we are looking to deal with. What we are going to concentrate on is essentially this area of the edge. That's what this presentation is going to focus on. So over a quarter of locations in a typical enterprise are running some form of applications. Now, Josh, it's about 25%. According to this survey, many customers think that they're probably going to reduce the percentage of applications. But what we are hearing from customers, particularly in the past few months, just alluding to the pendulum that Josh showed, there's going to be an increase in number of applications. We had our customer advisory board just a couple of weeks ago, and we had multiple customers who have gone the journey where they're going and embracing cloud-based applications, but now suddenly beginning to find that those cloud-based applications, those cloud-native applications that they've gone and built, probably aren't working the same way that they expected, particularly when it goes to the remote offices and branch offices at the periphery of their businesses. So we only think that percentage is going to increase. But when you go and look at those applications and those environments, there's some unique challenges that those locations have. A lot of those challenges don't just deal with the fact that there is an infrastructure challenge to deal with. We expect those to exist. These are going to be locations that might be miles and miles away. And we'll talk in a few customer studies about some customers that have those areas. A couple of months ago, I was in Australia where there's a construction company that's laying out a pipeline across the Northern Territory of Australia. And if you've seen the map of Australia, that's a very remote location. So getting any infrastructure there is a huge challenge. But beyond just the infrastructure challenges, there's a management challenge. There is an operational aspect that actually sometimes outweighs the challenges of just having infrastructure. Managing the data in those locations tends to be a bigger issue. Very often you may have scenarios where, and this tends to happen with some of our customers that are aid agencies in sub-Saharan Africa, as an example, where having a server in a remote location could very well mean that when the next coup happens, that just becomes fodder. That just becomes something that gets stolen or vandalized or completely lost. So you have that risk of intellectual property loss as well. But beyond that, there's another challenge which is related to the opportunity cost of having those many employees in all of these remote locations. And that's about how quickly can you deploy applications and services in those locations. It could be as simple as just trying to get Windows 10 updates to users in those locations. And that's a challenge some of our customers have gone and solved using SteelFusion. But it could also mean trying to get the next version of your revenue-producing ad inventory software that needs to go out to all your broadcast locations. These are some of the challenges that we are seeing customers run into, and that's squarely what we built SteelFusion to go in and address. Just to go back a little bit to the overall Riverbed portfolio, what we are seeing is many of these locations that are running these local applications have their own infrastructure. And that's typically some set of servers, storage, and possibly even backup software or backup infrastructure that you have in those locations. What we want to do is totally transform the way that you are looking at managing those services or that infrastructure in those locations. And that's the value proposition, or that's the challenge that SteelFusion is looking to go and address. We'll go in and click on that and understand a little bit more about how to do that. So fundamentally, what SteelFusion does is it provides you a platform, or the only platform in your edge locations, or the edge, we call it the Edge IT platform, where you are running all the services and applications that you would run in your remote office or branch office. Now, part of these are typically Riverbed services, such as WAN optimization that Riverbed's been famous for about since the beginning since early 2000s, essentially, having the ability to use commodity internet links and so on, so services like SD-WAN as well, but also the ability to manage all the data in those remote locations. So those are the Riverbed services. But what SteelFusion also provides you is the ability to go in and run infrastructure services such as your DHCP, DNS, and IP management systems, or even your Active Directory for that matter. In addition to that, we have many customers running file-based services. So probably the second most popular application that customers are running on SteelFusion is a file server or a print server of some format. But most importantly, we wanted to build a platform that was resilient enough and capable enough to be able to run line of business applications. Those applications without which a customer's, the employees at a particular location, it could be a sales office, or it could be a law firm, or it could be a complete manufacturing plant, where those applications absolutely need to stay up. What is the infrastructure that we could provide to go and run those applications? And that's what SteelFusion does. But it would be remiss if you think that all SteelFusion does is a way of running all those applications, purely in a virtualized format, in a virtualized form factor on a server, essentially. SteelFusion is far more than a server, and it essentially is a platform that changes the operating model for all of those locations and providing all these applications in remote offices. And this has been quite a bit of, this has been a very successful platform and a fairly successful product from a Riverbed perspective. We've been, so SteelFusion's been selling for about 5 years now. We've got quite a bit of market traction in those few years. We've had over 1,200 customers that are running various forms of applications on SteelFusion with over 10,000 devices, 10,000 appliances sold. We've had a significant amount of storage footprint that is associated with it. So we've had some tremendous success with customers in those environments. We've had success in customers across all verticals and across all geographies. The list here talks about a few public case studies that we have. They range from the entire gamut of verticals, from manufacturing to legal services, retail, aid agencies, government, and so on and so forth. But this is just a sampling of them. We'll double click on some of these case studies if we do have time. But the key takeaway from here is that this is just a product that a lot of customers have found value with over the past 5 years. Okay, so just going a little bit in terms of how does SteelFusion do this differently, and that's the concept that we are calling software-defined edge. And it's not really just about taking infrastructure and putting it in taking services, virtualizing them, and putting that on just a regular server. That's just that's not even half of the problem that we are looking to go do. But yes, we do that. First of all, we do try and simplify the way in which you are looking at infrastructure in your remote locations. So we do want to simplify that. We do want to reduce the number of boxes that you have to manage in each of those locations. There's a customer of ours that was a petroleum firm, and every time they needed to set up a new facility, would essentially stack up a quarter rack worth of equipment and have it shipped across on a pallet and have all the sorts of potential damage in shipping and so on to begin with, as challenges that they were dealing with. Now they are going and simplifying all of that infrastructure using a couple of 2U SteelFusion devices. So again, that's the simplicity that we offer. But it's not just that simplicity that we focus on. The second part about this is really about trying to reduce the footprint of data that you have in each of those devices. It's no use to you if that server that you have running gets picked up, in an arson attack, as happened with one of our customers, or if you're working in countries that have different intellectual property standards, and you may end up putting your data at risk. You don't want to have that risk. So the goal here is to try and make all of that, to reduce the footprint of data, and if possible, completely make it stateless, so that all the data goes back to your secure location, which is typically your data center. So that's the second part of the solution that we offer. And the last part is really about the agility by which you can go in and deploy services and applications at those locations. So I know we're supposed to have a software defined for pretty much everything these days, but when we talk about software defined, it's really about providing you that flexibility and that agility so that you can go in and change what services that you're running and do that in a very efficient manner, so that minimizes the application footprint, that minimizes the network overhead, and that minimizes the storage overhead that's associated with those applications. It's essentially like we are trying to deliver a cloud-like experience, almost like an on-demand way in which you can go in and deploy infrastructure and services at those locations. So how does this all work together? It's something that the underlying technology for SteelFusion is something that we call Blockstream. And fundamentally what it is three building blocks that are working together in very, very close harmony. The first part of which is essentially providing a smart cache of sorts. So what we would provide is, in an edge location, you have a cache for data that resides centrally back in the data center. And the purpose of that cache, and I'll walk through a little bit when I whiteboard all of this, is essentially to provide the buffer by which you can absorb reads and writes for all your edge applications, so that you don't compromise on performance that's associated with performance or latency that you would see with applications in those locations.
So WAN optimization?
No, it's WAN optimization is a component of the solution, but this one, the cache here is actually a full-blown storage cache. That's not really WAN optimization. Okay. We'll talk a little bit in terms of how that storage architecture evolves, but you can, in a nutshell, you can think about this as almost like providing hybrid storage tier that's an authoritative cache. Okay. In that sense. That's going to go in and represent the subset of data that actually lives in the data center. Okay. The second part about this solution is essentially the concept of continuous data protection. So when I started my career in the States, let's not get into how many years ago, CDP was the vogue, where everyone wanted to go in and provide, up to the minute, up to the second, protection for all your applications. We provide a level of that by providing essentially a synchronous replication for all the data that gets written at the edge. We faithfully replicate it back to the data center. And the last part of the solution is essentially something that we call application level prefetch. You can tell that that's probably a concept from 4 or 5 years ago. If it was something that we created today, we'd probably call it machine learning prefetch or something of that sort. But essentially, the idea here is that We've developed some intelligence over many, many years of having worked with applications at Riverbed. We understand how applications are functioning. We know when a file is being requested, and we will insert some smarts to make sure that your caches stay warm all the time. So together, the combination of these technologies is what makes SteelFusion work.